Hello, and you're very welcome to the week that really was for the week ending the 10th of November 2023. It's been a very busy week. Today, the 9th of November, was the day that Joseph Puska was finally convicted for the murder of Ashling Murphy. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. We're going to talk about Maria Bailey winning her High Court libel trial, following on from her resignation as a TD, and some other libel matters that have risen this week. And we're going to talk a little bit about the threat of Russia rigging Irish elections, which was raised by the American government to the Irish this week. But before we get to any of that, I'm joined as ever, because we're doing a lot of legal stuff this week, I might as well remind you that she's a barrister at law, and my colleague and friend Sarah Ryan. How are you?
Grand, how are you? Are you back from Rome?
I'm back from Rome.
Did you have a lovely, lovely time?
I did. It was made all the better because I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but the weather in Rome was actually really nice. It was like the middle of summer.
Mention it.
Yeah.
Yes,
and then I came back and it was absolutely appalling. So, and every day
in the last few days, definitely.
Yeah, it's been quite unpleasant. Anyway, I also got back. I was looking at some of the comments on last week's episode, and we got a usual range of them. There is one guy called @ReliableSauce said, "I try to listen to you two most weeks, and this week you've won first prize for being the smuggest co-hosts on the internet. Seriously, would you listen to yourselves and cop on?" I don't. First of all, I'm sorry if I'm smug. I don't know how not to be smug. Sarah, can you give me lessons on how not to be smug? Because it's a.
About.
Is it my voice?
What were we smug about last week? We were talking.
He didn't specify.
Well, I mean, look, sometimes we're smug.
Yeah, that's it. We can't avoid it, and we're sorry.
Yeah, we're sort of sorry.
At Digibeetle09 said that I said there's no real evidence that the jab is causing lots of deaths, and he seems to basically accept that, but he says he basically notes that the vaccine is what he says temporarily linked, as in linked in time, to a beginning of what he refers to as an increase in excess deaths, and says basically, I'm paraphrasing because it's a long comment, that makes him suspicious. Somebody else says,
I saw one that said that we were a government mouthpiece, which made me lol. Because, I don't think we've said much positive about the government on this podcast.
No, we haven't. But I want to say we don't only get negative comments. I got an email in during the week, actually on the topic of vaccines, which we'll come to in a second, but from a guy called Garrod O'Sullivan, who was writing to us from Shoreview in Minnesota. I won't give the rest of his address for obvious reasons, but he is a professor, an emeritus professor. He's recently retired in comparative pathology at the University of Minnesota. He says he listens to us because that's where he gets his news from home every week. So, Garrod, we're honoured that you do. And he also made quite a lengthy email, which, Garrod, you'll appreciate. I'm not going to read it all or even much of it at all. But basically, he was saying that as a professor in comparative pathology, he disagrees with me entirely from the other perspective on vaccines. He said that he sent me various papers saying essentially that the vaccine isn't perfect, but it was fantastically good, quote, at protecting against severe disease. He said the disease was basically defanged and turned into something not particularly lethal at all as a result of the vaccine. So that's a different perspective. Garrod put his name to his comment. He emailed it to me. He provided a link to a bunch of evidence for it. But you can agree with him, disagree with him. It's there. So look,
I think also like multiple things can be true at the same time. And maybe we weren't clear on this enough, but we did believe in the vaccine because we got it.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I quipped that it was just so I could go to a restaurant, but it wasn't really. There was definitely, there's definitely strong evidence to suggest at the time that, we slated it on the basis of it, killing your granny if you didn't get the vaccine, which was proven to not be true. But what we didn't give it credit for was reducing the strength of the virus when you got it. And that seems to have been the case. So it can have done that and also, be problematic, you know what I mean?
And also have been oversold, because I think what I've said about it consistently is, we were told, and don't tell me we weren't told, we were told on television and on the radio that it would prevent transmission. And we were told that by the experts, and it didn't. And I think whether it was effective or wasn't, and I tend to agree with Garrod. I think he's on to something there. I think there's a lot of evidence for the position he's taking. But I think a lot of damage was done in public confidence in vaccines by the degree to which it was, number one, oversold, and number two, mandated. I think those were huge public policy mistakes that the scientific community and the public policy community are going to have to come to terms with. Anyway, that was last week's discussion about vaccines. We're not going to drag it into this week.
Yeah.
Tell me what you thought about the verdict in the Puska trial.
I thought it was good. I thought it was, obviously, due process required and everything, but the evidence was pretty damning. I think I loved that the judge was, said that he was happy that the jury had only taken 2 hours, so they didn't give too much more of their time to his nonsense. Suggesting that while he was killing a woman, that he was helping her. When the 2 witnesses saw with their own eyes what he was doing. He's just. My problem with this will be the sentence.
It's not mandatory. Is he not getting life?
Yeah, but life isn't life. He should be in jail for the rest of his human life, if you know what I mean, but he won't be.
This is where, there's a whole thing we could talk about the lack of prison places, because we were told this week that the government is actually releasing people on temporary release because there's no room. There's something like 4,800 prison places in the state, and something like 5,500 people who've been sentenced to prison time at the moment. And we know it's pretty hard, by the way, to get sentenced to jail in Ireland, but they're actually letting people out, and they're not building more prisons, which is I think is a huge mistake. But yeah, you think he'll serve what, 12 years, 18? I'd say it'd be more like 25, something like that.
Well, let's wait and see. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to
put you on the spot as a lawyer, but to what extent is it up to the judge? I mean, it's a mandatory sentence of life, and then after that, what happens? Is the parole board in charge? Is it the Minister for Justice? How does that work?
No, that's a good question, actually, John. You are putting me on the spot. No, it's up to the judge within parameters for murder. But I can't remember the numbers. Like it's a straight murder charge, so I'd have to remind myself now. I was actually looking up immigration law this week because I had a meeting about something, and I was like, it's amazing how legislation and law goes out of your head if you're not practicing it every day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. No, I anyway, it's clear he's going to get a mandatory life sentence, which I think is the reason. I think is the reason why he didn't plead guilty, because it's mandatory whether you plead guilty or plead innocent or not guilty. You're basically in a case like that, you're playing with house money. I mean, you might as well take a swing at it and hope that you get a rogue juror somewhere who buys your cock and bull story, or thinks they're really smart by buying your reasonable doubt argument, and maybe you get off. Or maybe you get a hung jury or something. But that didn't happen. Didn't work for him. That's what I think. I'm not saying for a fact, but I think that's the. I
mean, ultimately, like, who cares about him? I think it's justice for her family. It was a real case of its. It was a kind of a case that changed us a bit. I think. It was just one of those cases. You know what I mean? That changed Ireland and changed people the way they thought about. I don't know, their 50. So it's good that the result was the result, if you know what I mean.
No, I completely agree with you about that. But what I would say is that I was struck over the last couple of weeks, because obviously when a trial is on at Gript, we can't report anything. We can't offer opinions on the trial. The law is there, and the law is there for a reason. But I was struck by the number of people who approached me, and they were almost all women. And it's not that only women approached me, but it was almost all women who said to me, "Do you think he might get off?" With real worry in their voices, like they thought there's a chance.
On what basis did they think he would get away with it?
That his lawyers were spinning this tale about, he was actually trying to help her, and there was no murder weapon, and there was no motive, and is it possible that will create reasonable doubt? And what I kept saying to those people was, I think this is really important. Not one of them thought he was innocent. They all just thought he might get off, which I thought was sort of interesting, because the jury is basically you, right? And if you don't think he's innocent, there's a fair chance the jury doesn't think he's innocent. I mean, I remember, by contrast, back during the Graham Dwyer trial, which must be nearly 10 years ago now, I was struck by the number of people, like educated people, who said to me at the time, I don't really think it would be safe to convict him. Now, they were a minority, but they were there. People who said, look, there's, in that case, which you won't go back over, but basically there was no evidence of the cause of death. There was just the implication that he had killed her. Whereas here there was a cause of death. There were eyewitnesses, all the rest of it. But I was still struck by the number of people who said to me, I'm worried he might get off. The fear of that was palpable in the country, and I think a lot of people breathed a sigh of relief today when the jury...
But do you not think that some of that is a kind of a media construct, that people get away with things like that all the time when that's not really true? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a kind of a construct created that, people murder women all the time and get away with it. And if you actually look at the evidence, it's not really the case. And murder like that by a stranger is exceptionally rare.
It really is.
The Graham Dwyer thing is a completely different thing. What I found astounding about that was there was very little evidence against him. And also, if he had pleaded, like if he had said it was an accident, there would have been no evidence against that.
Mm-hmm.
But he went for it anyway.
He did, and by the way, I think the right decision was arrived there. We're going to talk about the Graham Dwyer case. It's long in history, but that said, I do think there was a legal prospect of reasonable doubt. In this case, I don't think that existed, but no. I also think that the most chilling thing about it is the lack of one thing that was never really discussed at trial was motive. And I see a couple of pieces on RTE and the Irish Times even today after the trial has come out. Nobody knows why he did this. We do know. I mean, the other thing right throughout the trial, and we can't, and I want people to understand, we can't report stuff that is material to the trial while the trial is going on. But people kept asking, did he know her? Were his kids in her school? Did she report him to social services? The answer is no. There was no prior existing relationship or any knowledge of between these two people at all. And the other thing that we can say with certainty is there was no sexual element to it. There was no sexual assault of Ashling Murphy, which is, I suppose, the closest you can get in such a horrible case to a silver lining. And I know that's a terrible phrase, and I don't mean it that way, but there was nothing. It was just he killed a woman for no apparent reason at all. And that's the thing I think that's really unsettling. Nobody knows why.
But he just went out one day and just decided, I'm going to kill someone.
Yeah, I mean, misogyny does exist, right? I mean, I know it's a phrase that I think a lot of people on the right roll their eyes at because it's thrown around so much as an explanation for everything, but it does exist. There are men out there who just don't like women. We see it a lot in.
Yeah, well, of course there is. There's women who hate men. Like, I mean, there's both. Of course they exist. The question is, we've had this conversation before. The question is to what extent, if you're a woman like I am, you allow it to consume your day-to-day life and that you see it in everything that happens to you. Sometimes, a man pulls out in front of me in traffic and doesn't let me go just because he's a bit of a dick, not because I'm a woman. Do you know what I mean? And so on and so on. If you see misogyny everywhere, it will be everywhere. And that's what I have an issue with. But of course it exists. And of course there are men who are violent to women, and obviously in this case for absolutely no reason. But I don't think I think that there's a narrative, in Irish society across the board, not just when it comes to this, but in other ways, that it exists, that it's, if you're a woman, misogyny is just a part of your day-to-day life from the moment you open your eyes in the morning till the minute you go to sleep at night. And as a 40-year-old Irish woman, that has not been my experience.
No, and I would say as well, in relation to all this, I've talked to some men about it too. Well, not that I sat down and said, I want to talk to the Ashling Murphy trial, but it's come up over the course of the sort of 22 months since the incident happened. The narrative afterwards was all about sort of, men need to be better, men need to be X, Y, and Z, which is, as a general rule, men should be well behaved. No one will dispute that. But I was struck by the number of men who said something to me that, like, obviously they accept that women are at much more of a risk than men. I mean, in my own marriage, for example, my wife does a lot of photography. And that means when we were in Rome, for example, last week, she would go out because in photography, the time of day is very important. The best shots are early in the morning or just as dusk is falling. So she would get up and she would go off to the Colosseum or somewhere to take pictures just as dawn was breaking. And I hate that because I'm conscious she's a woman on her own in a strange city and I feel like I should be going with her. And she tells me, no, you're not to go with me. But the flip side is, if it were me out there at that hour of the morning, she would have no reason to worry because men simply aren't targeted that way as often, if at all. And I was struck by the number of men who, in the aftermath of the Ashling Murphy trial, said to me, yeah, we absolutely appreciate women are more at risk, but there's an awful lot of fathers and husbands and brothers who live with that fear as well for a person that they love. And I think that's it's an important counterpoint to make to the sort of men need to be better. This is a societal issue. It's not only a woman's issue.
Yeah, that's true.
So anyway, you were saying it's great for her family, and it is. But I mean, I think they'll spend the rest of their lives trying to answer that question of why it wasn't answered in court, and it probably never will be answered. Sadly, I think that's the worst part. And
it's so based on chance. Like he didn't know her, as you said. There was no motive. So just that run, that minute, that day, that time, like how you make sense of that, I don't know.
There was evidence presented in the trial, and people may have missed this if they weren't following it day to day, that he had actually been seen following two other women that same day very, very closely. And one of them noticed that he was following her and was unnerved by it. The other one didn't notice at all. It was just on CCTV. But what was really chilling was the words from the Garda sources who told the media that in their view those two women were exceptionally lucky, which indicates to me that the Garda believe that he was out that day to kill a woman.
But why? It's so.
Yeah, well, this is it.
And he must have known he probably wasn't going to get away with it. So what was the point? Wasn't there a man like that though a few years ago who killed a woman up in the Wicklow Mountains, and he just woke up one day and was like, "Today's the day."
There was the case of I can't remember that specific case, but it sounds familiar. But there was the case in the US last year of Audrey Hale. I'm going to refer to her as the transgender school shooter, but I'm not implying at all that she shot up school because she was transgender, or he, or whatever gender he was born as, she was born as. But like that was they released a sort of manifesto from that person this week, which just literally said, "I'm going to kill a load of kids in the school today." It was like 8 a.m. have breakfast, 9 o'clock you're up, 10 o'clock get the car, 11 o'clock arrive at school. It was chilling in its sort of simplicity. There was no actual reason given. It was just, here's what I'm going to do, and I have it all planned. Some people are just mad, or mad is perhaps the best word we can use to describe something that we don't understand. Anyway,
I mean, it's the randomness of it that is terrifying that people like that can exist. And I don't know, but like the only like thing to remember is how rare it is. Like women are killed by men, don't get me wrong, but a stranger murdering you like that is exceptionally rare.
You're much more at risk, sadly, from your own husband, not you. And hopefully not my wife, but statistically.
No, but statistically, yeah, it's not. You're not statistically going to get murdered by a stranger. You're statistically going to be murdered by a male relative of some description.
Anyway, look, we could depress ourselves more and more talking about it, but we'll move on. We'll just say it's great that the family got justice, and I think the country breathed a sigh of relief, as this week did a former TD, Maria Bailey. She won her libel case against the Irish Daily Mirror because they had said that I'm not going to repeat the libel. That will be walking into being sued myself. But they had basically indicated that, in their view, people might remember Swinggate. They had basically implied falsely that she had exaggerated her injuries and was taking a false claim against the hotel. And the court this week ruled that no, that was libelous. She was injured. She was taking a legitimate claim against the hotel. Do you think she's in any way vindicated by that?
I think vindicated, maybe. I mean, it certainly was the beginning of the end of her whole career. So, like, there's no doubt that she suffered loss as a result of their actions. I also think it's important to make the point and for newspapers to be, like slapped a bit on these kind of pile-ons that happen without real due diligence being done on the facts. And, she was a good example, and there's been others since with different politicians and different things where, the media just run with things. The mob gets something in their head and the media start running with things. And, it's good for them to be made an example of that. You can't do that. And, so I think she's vindicated, yeah, but I also think that, it's a very small drop in the ocean, but it's still, a symbol of that the media should be doing more work and more. I understand that newspapers are competing with social media and everything's moving at a pace or whatever, but you can't just write things that you feel like.
Well, it's funny. I have some empathy, not with what the Mirror wrote, but I have some empathy with their editor or the person who signed off on that story, because I know what happened. Because I do the same job every day. I mean, when these mob pile-ons happen, what the actual story is changes very quickly in the public mind to what the imagined story is. Mm-hmm. And so the facts of the case, that basically what she was being criticized for was not taking a fraudulent insurance claim. Her insurance claim was perfectly legitimate. The question was whether she should have been taking it at all, or whether perhaps it might have been her own fault that she fell off the swing. And
also, it was just for her bad luck that it was that particular swing in that particular restaurant, because she's a South Dublin TD, and South Dublin women have a kind of a special relationship with that swing in that restaurant. So it was, they felt personally victimized by the swing being criticised, I think.
I wasn't aware of that bit of the story, but anyway, I think what happened though was that you've basically got, I don't know who wrote the piece, and I might be wrong. What I suspect, based on being an editor myself and dealing with this sort of stuff from time to time, is that somebody writing a column or writing a news report kind of misunderstood the story of what she was being criticized about, and then just decided to throw in words that had no basis in fact, to say, oh, you took a dodgy claim or whatever, which is defamatory and wrong.
I'm just thinking just to clarify, because there possibly are some people listening who don't know what there is a restaurant in Dublin that has a swing, like exactly like you imagine a swing, in the kind of foyer of the restaurant, and people sit on the swing and take their photo or whatever, and she fell off this swing. And so just in case people are listening who don't understand what we're talking about and are imagining a swing in a park or something, it's a swing in a restaurant.
Yes, and as a result of that, sorry, I normally remind people of the story before, but as a result of that, she was then deselected by her own political party, was not allowed to run for re-election as a candidate for Fine Gael, which is the governing party, and was roundly criticised by members of her own party, and basically her political career was ended as a result of this decision.
And I might add as well, because I'm very friendly with people who were on Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown County Council with her, and she was very, very highly regarded by her colleagues as a councillor, if you know what I mean. Like her ability as a councillor, her understanding of the council, of the way things work, and her kind of commitment to it, and her helpfulness to other colleagues was really, really complimented by everybody I know. So it was a shame, really.
It was. And look, I think she made a bad political decision, because I mean, it is a political topic in the country. I mean, there's a lot. You talk to any small business, they'll say insurance costs will kill them above anything else. That's the biggest constant problem they have, is insurance costs. Trying to get insurance is one of the reasons, for example, that childcare costs are so high. Is the constant risk of a child having a catastrophic accident in a childcare facility. Therefore, insurance costs are through the roof, and that drives up prices for customers. It drives up prices for you, Sarah, when you want to leave your kids in childcare. It drives up prices for restaurants, shops, the whole lot. So it's a legitimate political issue, and one of the biggest bugbears of anyone in business is, and I'm not saying this is what Maria Bailey's injuries were, for clarity, but one of their biggest bugbears are so-called slip and fall injuries, where somebody slips and hurts their hip, and the courts award them 40 grand, and that's happened. And so there was a perception that this was the nature of the claim that she was taking, that it was in the sort of slip and fall category. She fell off a swing, now she's suing, and that's why it was politically harmful.
It was with the backdrop of a huge amount of insurance hikes. I mean, my kids are young, and you're lucky enough to never probably have been in a soft play centre, but there was a number of soft play centres that I certainly used for survival when I had two very small kids. And you go in, there's a coffee shop, and the whole place is just soft, and the kids can run around and play. And the insurance on those places went absolutely out of control, and a number of them, one in particular close to me, just closed. So annoying. So with that in the background, she just happened to have this claim, and it took off as a story. And as we clearly see now, people ran with it when they shouldn't have, and it ultimately was the end of her career. And like, you win your defamation case if you're able to demonstrate that you've suffered loss, and she clearly did.
She did. So I mean, I think she has been vindicated in a sense, in the sense that the pylon was deeply wrong. I think the criticism of her, some degree of criticism, was absolutely legitimate. I think she owed the public an explanation when it became a story. I don't think her communication strategy was very good at providing that explanation. But I also want to say something which I think is really important, because the way in which she is a victim in my mind is this. She was the plaintiff in this case. Yes, that's true. But her solicitors was the firm of solicitors owned by her Fine Gael colleague, Josepha Madigan, who is a solicitor. And as well as being a TD and junior minister, he's also a solicitor. And that firm of solicitors did not receive any criticism, even though I'm not aware of anyone in the history of the world who would ever take a legal case when their solicitors tell them they don't have a case. That's the first point. And the second point is, like, the way her own party turned on her was really, really distasteful in my view. The Taoiseach turned on her. Simon Coveney, who I understand is related to her by blood, turned on her. I thought it was a real example of somebody being unfairly victimized. Yes, there was legitimate criticism to be had of her, don't get me wrong, but there's a difference between legitimate criticism and a pylon mob. And I think we had a pylon mob, and I'm glad she got some recompense, because she said herself she couldn't go outside the door for months after it. People who've never been at the center of a pylon, Sarah, don't understand what it's like. They've no idea how terrifying it can be.
Yeah, I mean, another thing, by the way, I'd say, and this isn't particularly popular, but I'm going to say it anyway, is just because you're a TD or a politician doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to make claims. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There was definitely an element of that. Like, let's look through all the claims that TDs have made and see what they are. But like, if I'm a TD or a minister and I suffer, a bad injury because of someone else's negligence, I'm entitled to take that case. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. It's and there is an element of that. There is an element of, how dare you, I think it comes down to what I call government jet syndrome. I mean, look, I can see the comments coming in now.
There's an element of that. It's like, sure, aren't you earning enough already? Why are you making a claim? Sorry, I don't buy that at all. Like, you should be, if you're, like I said, if you've suffered, you should be able to make a claim, and it's irrelevant. And I think that some of the commentary was, more begrudgery than actually, being concerned about the nature of her claim. Obviously, it didn't help if it was being, claimed otherwise in newspapers, fine. But like, if she had a legitimate, I don't know the ins and outs of that thing, but she's entitled to make claims just because she's regardless of the fact that she's a politician or not.
No, I mean, I think that's very clear, and that's certainly
the atmosphere at the time, John, would have been that if you'd been a TD around that time going on, and you'd been rear-ended by somebody, and they came along, like, you'd probably be like, oh, listen, let's just leave it, because you'd be terrified of what it would look like. And then all of a sudden they're starting to write articles about how some poor unfortunate man's insurance is going up because the big rich TD is trying to get him. You know what I mean? So you'd stay away from it. That's not right either.
That's what happens. I mean, and look, I can see the comments rolling in YouTube already that we're pro-government and we're pro all this, and they're causing all the problems in the country and we're sticking up for them. And look, I get that. But I think it's important to say
pro-government or not, John, because it's to do with somebody else will be in government next year, the year after potentially, and I'll say the same thing. It's about the standards, that we hold people to, and the standards we expect of ourselves when we're criticizing people. And you can criticize government policy on insurance all day, and I will, and I do. But like, this kind of thing of going after TD is just a nonsense, and should be beneath all of us. That doesn't mean I'm standing up for the government. It just means I have a view on what way we should behave.
And I also think so much misses the point. We never get a pile on about ministerial incompetence. No minister ever gets driven out of office for persistent failure over a period of years. It's always something stupid like this. Now, Marie Bailey wasn't a minister, she was a TD. There's always something dumb like this, which I think, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say, I think that reflects on the voters. I think it reflects it. You want to know why we have all these problems in the country? I mean, look at the electorate. Look what the electorate prioritizes, because they very rarely will throw a politician out of office for something as minimalistic as incompetence. But a missed I dotted or T crossed on an expenses claim, and we're out with the pitchforks and the torches. And that, I think, fundamentally goes to an issue with the political culture. Because if you continue to focus on all this minutiae, if you're one of those people who believes that the country be fixed, we get rid of the government jet and have TD salaries, then you're missing the bigger point. The bigger point is that all that stuff is a distraction, which gets you all worked up when the issue is incompetence. And I think this is a good example of that. Anyway, what about your old mate Chris Andrews?
My old mate. Well, the irony of it is that, so some background. He was my mate. He was good friends with my family, and we were all friendly, and the Andrews were in politics and we were in politics, and he was a friend of the family very much. His dad was very, very good friends with my dad, and that kind of friend where when I was younger I got tickets to, I think, Oasis, and I was kind of like not old enough to go to a concert on my own, but I really, really wanted to go, and my mum and dad asked him to bring me and my three mates because he was kind of cool enough. That's the level. So he brought us to the concert. So just to be clear, we were friends, and growing up, his family and my family were friendly. And then we weren't, because for a variety of reasons, but culminating in Chris Andrews setting up a fake Twitter account to make comments to people, other people, and me included, and under a fake account, which he subsequently was caught. And then he, left Fianna Fáil in inverted commas and joined Sinn Féin. But he is this week which I tweeted about this week, because I just think it's ironic that the guy who didn't have the integrity or the courage to make comments himself to the people he wanted to when he was in politics, or in the, years ago, is now not just suing the Irish Times, but suing Harry McGee personally for a defamatory comment he is claiming was made by Harry McGee in an article that was published relating to I'm not going to, exactly what you said, I'm not going to get into what was said, but it was regarding the Israel-Palestine conflict. And
I read the article. I couldn't find anything particularly defamatory.
Yeah.
Defamation has to be, number one, untrue, and number two, has to lower your reputation in the eyes of a reasonable person. That's the standard, which all of us in the media are sadly very aware of. That's probably correctly very aware of, because both those things, nobody wants to publish an untrue thing that lowers somebody's reputation. That would be wrong, even if it wasn't defamation.
Are you deliberately lining up a joke where I could make a joke about his reputation already being lowered in the eyes of society with his fake Twitter account, or am I just imagining that?
Well, you've just ruined the joke by making it now, haven't you? But I also think there's a reasonable question as to whether it is defamatory in Ireland to basically say somebody is exceedingly pro-Palestinian. Is that defamatory? I mean, the leader of his own party is exceedingly pro-Palestinian, and she's on course to be elected the next Taoiseach, so it's clearly not lowering her reputation in the eyes of two people.
Or extremely pro-Palestine. That's not defamatory, surely.
I don't think that was the exact formulation of words that was used, to be fair, but it was certainly the implication.
Anyway, it's besides the point, really, because the point is that normally when you're defamed in a newspaper, you sue the newspaper. It's not commonplace to to personally sue the journalist, and it's a bit of a concern. That's the real story.
Well, I have to say, I find all this very ironic, and I want to say I share all your views about Deputy Andrews, but I do find this concern about Harry McGee being sued to be a bit ironic. Not because I don't like Harry McGee. He's a very fine journalist. I've many dealings with Harry over the years. You couldn't ask to meet a nicer guy.
Yeah,
I've never encountered anything that he's written which I thought was unfair. I think he's scrupulously fair, and I wouldn't say that.
Very fair, and always has been very, very fair.
I wouldn't say that about every political correspondent, as you know, sir. But the reason I find it ironic is not because of the defence of Harry McGee, although maybe it's because he's so well thought of that this defence is being made. But the exact same thing happened to me 2 years ago. It happened to myself and my colleague Gary Kavanagh. We were both sued along with Gript in relation to an article we published about an individual. Now, the case was dropped, hasn't gone anywhere, it isn't going to go anywhere. But it happened and it was stressful. So it's not as new as the NUJ are suddenly making it out to be. And in fact, the case that was taken against us was widely publicised in the media, almost with some glee.
But that's because it's you. Let's be honest. That's because it's you and Gript, and you're just, we're just this. There was somebody giving out to me recently, and telling me about how, what a disappointment I am about doing a podcast for Gript, and how sure no one's listening to it, no one's reading it, no one's listening to it, no one's reading it, no one's listening to it. And I was like, mate, you're so concerned, it's so obvious. And I see the numbers, and they are listening to it, and they are reading it. I'm sorry for you, but they are. They don't care about a defamation case against you personally, John, because that's great. And the typical Irish way, spectacularly missing the principled point, which is that journalists themselves shouldn't be personally sued, but it only matters when it's someone important to them. And I share your views on Harry McGee, and I think he's a really good, really fair journalist. Absolutely. And I think this is wrong. And I think that the precedent that it should not be set, that people, you can't be a journalist who's going to worry about losing his house if he writes an article.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And the other point here is just we've talked about it in relation to other things, but I can tell you, having been through various defamation matters as the editor of Gript, the process is the punishment.
Yeah.
Because a defamation case doesn't see the inside of court for at least, at the very, very shortest, 18 months. And if you're very, very lucky, it could be 5-6 years.
Yeah.
I mean, if people think about the case Sean Gallagher took about the 2011 presidential election, when RTE basically settled with him and apologised in the end, that took 7 years. And if you're the defendant in the case, and you're just somebody on income working as a journalist for a publication, that's 7 years of your life. It's 7 years of legal fees. And I hope and assume that the Irish Times will indemnify him for his costs. Mm-hmm. But he didn't publish that article. It went through. He wrote it, and because again, I speak from experience, because this is how it happens in Gript. He wrote the article. He submitted it to his editor. It was then checked. It was read. Is there anything in here that we shouldn't be publishing? Are there typos in it? Blah, blah, blah. And the Irish Times, by the way, has a much more thorough process because they've got more people than Gript does. went through sub-editors, it went through a news editor, probably signed off by the political editor. So Harry McGee may have written the piece, but he didn't publish it. And this, I think, is very relevant because in defamation, the crime is publication.
Yeah. Well, there's no defamation if it's not published.
Absolutely. I mean, I could, if you and I weren't being listened to by several thousand people right now or over the next week, and I was just to say to you on the phone, I think Joe Bloggs is a paedophile. That's not defamation as long as you don't tell Joe Bloggs I said it. Yeah. You'll never find out. Yeah. But if I was to name a Joe Bloggs and say he's a paedophile on this, then I've published it. And that's defamation. Now, it's the act of publishing that makes it relevant. I mean, here I am lecturing the lawyer, but this is an area I've sadly become familiar with over the last couple of years. And I just think it's an area where...
But it's also the 7 years, and even like, and by the time, that you get to the end, no one even cares anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's depending on which side you are, as you say, the process is the punishment. But it's the separation of the journalist that's of concern, and I think that's a legitimate concern. And I think it's like mind-bogglingly silly and foolish of a TD to do this, because I think long-term, no journalist, because journalists obviously stick together. I think no journalist will do you a favor ever again. You know what I mean? Like, because you've gone after a journalist personally. Like, I don't think it's a smart move. But
not just any journalist. I mean, like I bow to nobody. As anyone who follows me on social media or reads a word I write knows, I bow to nobody on my criticism of the Irish media. I think a lot of journalists are terrible, but Harry McGee ain't one of them, and he's highly respected across all parties, across all newspapers, because he ain't terrible. So you're not going after like, some freshman straight out of the DCU journalism school who's done something silly writing for the Daily Mail. You're going after somebody who's very senior. And
I wouldn't expect any less from a clown like Chris Andrews, to be perfectly honest.
But the other thing about defamation law, Sarah, I mean, aside from that, is that if you're on the other side, by the way, the length of time it takes is ridiculous as well. Because, like, if you're suing somebody because they've said something defamatory about you, and then 4 years later they're forced to apologize. Yeah. I mean, chances are everyone has forgotten it was said in the first place.
Totally. You defend somebody by saying they're having an affair and their wife, by the time they get there, they've divorced and gotten a new one. Like, what was the point? Like,
it's bizarre, and I do think, I know I'm talking to a lawyer, but like, I think the legal system in this country is so badly in need of reform.
I will pass that on. I'll pass that feedback on.
You pass that on to the lawyers.
I'll tell them all.
Poor old Alan Shatter tried and he got shut down.
But there's another good brain. Like, he had a lot of really good legal ideas. He wanted to introduce lots of interesting stuff, and gonzo. Like, this is the point that if we focus on the wrong things, we lose people who are smart. It doesn't mean I agree with everything Alan Shatter did. So before you start sending in comments about things that he did, I'm not talking about that, but I'm saying he was a good legal mind.
I always found Alan Shatter to be a politician who, like, he never had a mediocre idea.
Yeah.
His ideas were always really, really, really good. And some of his proposals for legal reform, for example, were really, really good, or absolutely terrible. There's no in between with Alan Shatter. But he had ideas. I mean, he's been replaced now by Helen McEntee, and the country is presumably safer for it. That was
the smug thing, John. That was the smug moment there.
That was. Anyway,
for this week's smugness, that's it. And me also getting to put the knife into Chris Andrews still once again, because someone said to me the other day on Twitter, they're like, are you not letting that go or something? And so if you're listening, no, I'm not actually. I became absolutely incensed one day when Chris Andrews, when it was going on, said on the radio that he'd apologized to everyone concerned, and I hadn't heard from him. So I'm not letting it go.
Just an aside, before we move on to our final topic, the Roman statesman, consul, and temporary dictator, I believe it was somebody who's familiar with classics is going to embarrass me. I got this wrong, but I'm attributing it to the Roman statesman, consul, and dictator Lucius Cornelius Sulla, who had written on his headstone the phrase "No better friend, no worse enemy." That is also Sarah Ryan.
Thanks.
So Chris Andrews is never going to be forgiven, I think, nor should he be. Anyway, he might, however, be replaced because this week we learned, courtesy of the American embassy, that the Russians are going to rig Irish elections. There was a severe warning of this in the Irish Times, I think on Monday, that the Irish government has been informed that the Kremlin is seriously considering measures to influence the outcome of the next Irish general election. So we head down to the Russian embassy and tell them what pro-Russians we are and see if we can get jobs out of it.
Yeah, or like, and they just go in like kind of have a kind of a fantasy football league, like have your picks and decide like who you want and who you don't want.
Yeah.
Is there anybody who would be your top 3 must-have? I know this is going to get us into this is going to be too troublesome, isn't it? Is there anybody like all right? I'll speak.
You mean if the Russians were going to rig the elections, who would I want them to rig it for? You're asking me. I would like this country to have basically abolished the Dáil and place the country under the benevolent dictatorship of George Hook. There you go. I don't know if Vladimir, if you're listening, you can work that. But I don't think that's likely.
Certain things like Keith and I have had conversations before where because as you say, I'm mean sometimes, but I'm not that mean. And I always say to Keith, just do me one favor, because I have personal experience of it, and it's not nice. If people lose their seat, don't gloat at them on Twitter. It's horrible. Just people lose their seats. That's fine. Don't write about it. Don't tag them in comments on Twitter. It's just unsavory to me. But in the past, there have been people, as you know, in private that I've been extremely happy about them losing their seats. One I don't mind saying was Catherine Zappone, for a variety of reasons, take your pick. But so there'd be people that like I'd be kind of, not devastated to see them lose, and then there'd be people that I'd hold on to. But what I don't really understand about that story is is there any suggestion as to whom they would be doing that for?
No, and I think it's going to be really interesting because I think some people are going to, it depends on where your incentives lie, right? I think there's a couple of things about this. First of all, I think there's a degree in which you could almost feel it with that story. There's some people in the country who are kind of like openly concerned, but like also a little bit chuffed that Ireland is important enough for the Russians to want to rig our elections. So I also think there's competing incentives. So I think if you're in the media and you're one of those people who's terrified about the old Reich, as spelled Forroysh, you want to say that they're going to try and rig the elections for, I don't know, Justin Barrett and the National... Oh, Justin Barrett doesn't run the National Party anymore. I forgot about that. Or the Irish Freedom Party, or some kind of populist anti-immigration outlet that the Russians will be 100% behind them. But I think if you're in Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, you probably want to imply that the Russians are kind of like liking themselves a bit of Mary Lou.
I know, yeah. But but why would they bother?
Well...
no, talk it out. Like, this is the thing. Talk it through. There's no suggestion that it'd be... So why would the Russians be like, you know what? See that country there, that small one? Yeah, let's get in there. Like,
it makes no sense to me for a couple of reasons. The first one is that this country has not exactly been... Yes, we've been rhetorically hostile to Russian interests, but we haven't exactly been supplying the Ukrainian army with a bunch of arms. Second of all, I think there's a perfectly good reason why the Russians would want to leave us as we are, which is that if you are the Russians and you're looking across the globe and you're trying to focus your intelligence efforts, a small, relatively pro-Western country on good terms with the Brits and the Americans that has absolutely no national security infrastructure we're talking about, that can't protect its undersea cables, that, has a chief of guard intelligence position this week that's being advertised in the UK because there's no one qualified to fill it here. I think you're probably saying, yeah, we quite like the idea of loads of American and UK intelligence flowing through that country and being shared with that government because it's probably more penetrable than, for example, Poland or France. Yes. I'm not saying that they have or that they would, but I mean, I don't know what the benefit is of putting in a pro-Kremlin regime in Ireland. I don't know what Russia gains from that. And also, I think they'd probably miscalculate because the nature of Irish politics, sadly, is that I think the Foreign Office determines what our foreign policy is. And while I'm sure that if Sinn Féin take power, we'll become a little bit more pro-Gaza in our rhetoric, maybe recognise a Palestinian state, maybe be more critical of NATO, I don't think we are either going to expel the Israeli ambassador under Sinn Féin government or suddenly turn pro-Putinist in our approach to Ukraine. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think, if the Russians are disappointed, a lot of Sinn Féin voters will be disappointed by that as well. But I think I would be surprised if that happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think...
And sorry, the last point is there's absolutely no point. And this is not to... I'm not going to say that the Irish Freedom Party won't take any seats in an election. I don't know what will happen in the election. They may well. Same is true of the National Party or any other fringe right-wing movement. But there's no prospect of them being in government. So why would they bother?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that the, people, groups that will be highly influential, whether we like it or not, in elections tend to be, of the social media company variety as opposed to countries like Russia, my view.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's where a lot of this propaganda is being fought. I mean, some of the biggest accounts on social media these days. I mean, the one account which is much bigger than Elon Musk's actually in terms of reach at the moment is an account that is overtly pro-Stalinist and overtly, without any apology, kind of publishes misinformation and lies in a particular direction. And there's an audience for it. Because there's a lot of people who out there who I think they're not pro-Russia because they love Moscow or want to spend their summers in St. Petersburg. It's more sort of expression of their rejection of what Western society has become. They're like, we don't like the decadent society in which we live. We much prefer the idea of sort of an authoritarian, strong regime that cracks down on crime, and there's a sort of a fantasy of a sort of return to authoritarianism that comes with the Russians. Some people on the right, sadly, find attractive. And then on the left, there's a sort of reflexive anti-Americanism, and Russia is the enemy of the weak of America, therefore Russia must be good. So I don't think there's much sort of actual pro-Russianism in. We like what Russia believes and what it's doing. I think it's much more reflexive anti-Western stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the spectre of Russia, influencing our elections is going to be a good yarn between now and then. But anything to make the elections a bit more exciting, because to be honest, as I've said before, like the idea of kind of like a same old election where Fianna Fáil's phrase is whatever, it's all an Ireland for all, and it just all goes along the same, and then Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil make a government again. It's very depressing.
Yeah, but I agree with you. But there's another element about this which I think is quite sinister. I'm going to say I think it's sinister, which is that the accusation, when you talk about Russia rigging Irish elections, or British elections, or American, whatever, the accusation is always made by sort of the people in power that, if Russia's trying to undermine our elections, that kind of means you can't trust what you're hearing from the opposition, because you don't know, they could be on the Kremlin's payroll. And so when you talk about undermining trust in Western elections, it actually allows the government to undermine trust in the election, because it lets them, and they would never say it outright, but it lets them give dark warnings about misinformation and foreign influence and all this sort of stuff that is intended to make a sort of trusting voter look skeptically at what the opposition is saying, as if, is Mary Lou McDonald really saying that, or is there a puppet? I'm using her as an example. And so it actually has all this stuff about, this is the really sinister thing about it. All this stuff about misinformation and disinformation and fake news is designed by the establishment to undermine trust in their own opposition, while they talk about the importance of trust and sensible news. It's a complete inversion of what they say is happening. Being what they do themselves.
Yeah.
So,
but I said that, but like that's kind of the similar point to what I was making earlier on, which is about women and about misogyny and fear. Is that if you hear all the time that you should be fearful, you start to be fearful.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It's like that. There's a kind of the narrative becomes the thing that's giving you anxiety as opposed to the reality of it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is what it is, and it's going to keep going, because I think journalists in particular, I think it's not unrelated to sort of the overall reduction in trust levels in the media and media readership and all the rest of it. Journalists in particular are hugely incentivized to build up this sort of fake news story, primarily so they can extract funding from the government, because it's so important to have trustworthy sources of news. And so the narrative isn't going away.
That's why we keep on paying for people in RTE to get flip-flops at their parties.
Yes. Oh, I should mention, I know we said we'd discuss various topics at the start and we got through them, but I was very amused today to see that the JNLR listenership figures are out. Sarah, did you see that?
No, pray tell.
Yes, so Ryan Tubridy's old slot on RTE, since he left, how do you think that went?
Who's doing it?
No one's doing it permanently. They've had an array of hosts, including Oliver Callan is one of them, and then others. I don't listen, so I don't know. I know Oliver Callan is doing some of it, and then it's been divided amongst others. How much do you think they're down?
Is it in percentages?
Any figure. Just give it. I'll tell you what. It's 13,000. Except they're not down at all. They're up 13,000.
Oh my God, you're joking.
No, they're up. So, I mean, I just think that's...
What's your explanation for that?
Well, I don't have an explanation for why they're up, but I think it's terrible news for everyone else in RTE on a massive salary. It's just punctured a hole in the idea that you're on a massive salary because you draw listeners that somebody lower paid couldn't.
But are people listening in to see who's there? But like that wouldn't make sense. They'd just be flicking on for a minute then.
Yeah, there could be a bit of that. But I mean, the fact is with RTE, all those radio slots, their biggest draw of listeners is not the host. It's inertia. It's that some people listen to Radio 1, some people listen to News Talk, some people listen to Today Event. It's very hard to get people to change.
But also they listen at certain times. So like if I listen to the radio, which I go through phases, but like the kids start school at 10 to 9. So the drop is at 10 to 9. I'm usually back at the house by 9. So that means that I automatically tend to be listening to the radio at 9 while I clean up the breakfast stuff. Do you follow? Like it's not because I'm tuning in at 9 o'clock because I want to hear Morning Ireland with a particular person. It's that's the time that I actually listen to the radio. If I'm picking the kids up at 2:15, and I turn on the radio, Joe Duffy's on, that's because I'm in the car. It's not because I'm tuning in because I want to hear from Joe Duffy.
Yeah, for me, I don't listen to the radio because I'm at home most of the day working. But when I used to leave the house to go to work, I probably would have had News Talk's drive time program, which is now Kieran Cuddihy, and then would have been George on. But like George Hook is the only. I mentioned earlier he should be dictator of the country. I don't want to sound like a mega fan. I'm not. George is a great guy. He's a great guy, but he's also the only radio program I'd ever actually tuned into to listen to what George is saying about something or other. That's just not true of anyone else in the Irish media landscape before.
Oh no, sometimes sometimes you and I have a friend in common that shares this with me, that sometimes there's real comedy in listening to Joe Duffy about certain things. Yeah. Sometimes when something happens, there has been times in my life, John, where I have been under my desk at work with a fist stuffed into my mouth to stop me from laughing at that's things I have heard on Joe Duffy, and it's not always intentionally. They're not trying to be funny, but they just are.
Well, I tend to see, like, you always know if Live Line is trending, something good is happening. So I listen back to the best bits. I very rarely turn it on though, because it's just it's very funny.
If I was living abroad now, there'd be things. I suppose you have the player or whatever, but like there's been moments. There's just this part of Irish culture. You know what I mean? I love the fact that Joe Duffy every year, the day after the junior cert results, they were drunk, Joe. It's terrible, Joe. Every year, same thing. Every year, the day after Halloween, Joe, it's terrible. They were lighting a fire. Oh, terrible. Like there is a kind of a comforting madness in it sometimes that I enjoy thoroughly. I won't lie.
Maybe we should do a phone-in episode of the podcast some week.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Anyway, leave your comments on YouTube or email them to me. You'll email them to news@gript.ie. They will get to me, or leave them anywhere else you see it. We always want feedback. You can tell us how smug we were this week, how boring we were, how much you loved us, how much you hated us, whatever. You have a right to tell us.
Yeah, no, next week you have to read out some of the nice ones, because apart from the email, there is loads of nice ones.
There are, yeah, but I always kind of feel I don't like reading out praise. I don't know why. I might send them to you. You can read them out.
I'm fine. I'm totally comfortable with it.
My mother, no, it wasn't my mother. I think my mother was actually my grandmother who used to have this phrase, like if you ever said you did something particularly well, self-praise is no praise, she'd say.
But it's not self-praise. Reading out comments from other people, and I don't really care either way, but I just don't want to create the illusion to people who are listening and who are committed to misunderstanding us, which, there are some. Think that we only get negative feedback, and we don't.
No, we don't. And on that note, thank you to all of you who do listen every week. It means a lot to us, and hopefully we mean something to you as well. But from now until next week, that, my friends, was another episode of The Week That Really Was. Have a great weekend. Talk to you next week.